thank all of you for being here, and thank you for all the great work you do for all of our sport programs and giving them the coverage that our student athletes have earned. And I appreciate the great work you do. Jerry's right, and when he mentioned this to me, I just needed to spend some time with you and maybe answer any questions about all the stuff that's going on in our world. And our landscape's changing significantly. The collegiate model that we all are used to is different today, and it will be significantly different in the future for all the reasons you all are familiar with. NIL has changed our landscape, and we'll continue to change it. We'll continue to learn from it and grow. In fact, we had a meeting with the football team this morning just to kind of reiterate some of the things they need to be sensitive to. And the Austin case was decided in California, so that's going to change how we fund our academic support for our student athletes moving forward. The Players Association has sued USC and UCLA, and who knows where that's going to play out. We all watched that with Northwestern in the past, and so we'll have to watch and see how that plays out. And so the conversations around pay for play are always there. The NCAA is restructuring. The Transformation Committee is in place now that the Constitution has been changed, and so I think the Transformation Committee has by August 1 to present their recommendations, and Damon Evans from Maryland and Jana from Northwestern are our representatives from the Big Ten on that committee. So it's just going to be a whole new ballgame as we move forward, and so lots of changes, and what we have to do is kind of get comfortable with the get comfortable with the uncomfortable and adjust and make sure we keep our core values and core mission at the heart of what we do, and that's our student athletes. So just wanted to share that and as a perspective to start things out, and see what questions you guys have about anything at all.
We'll open up front row middle. Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for doing this today, Gene. I appreciate it. Curious to get your take on name, image, and likeness. It's kind of the Wild West right now.
Yeah.
Do you think it should be regulated? And if so, how can it be regulated?
Yeah, Dave, no question about it. I think it should be regulated. In fact, I served on the committee and made the ultimate recommendation with my colleagues, and I felt at that time there might be some regulations that would emerge. Either the NCAA would regulate or there might be some federal legislation that might occur. That didn't happen. There's no federal regulations right now, and the NCAA is taking a little different approach to it, and so understandably so, with all the different state laws that exist that they would run up against. So I'm hopeful that at some point in time we do get federal legislation. I don't think the NCAA is the answer in this particular case. I think it needs to be federal legislation, and that won't happen now because of what's going on in Washington, but maybe it will at some point. I think there's enough politicians who are paying attention and are interested, but it's going to take time. So in the interim, it is a wild, wild west, and so many different things have emerged, and what we have to do is make sure we don't lose ground in our competitive advantage in this space, but also do what's right for our student athletes and protect them and make sure that they're taking advantage of it the right way. So it's kind of our focus, but you're right. It's every day there's something new that you read about or hear about. Yeah.
I want to ask you about divisions in the Big Ten real quick as well. Do you like the status quo with the divisions, or do you think it should be no divisions, top 2 teams go, like the Big 12 does it? Just what are your thoughts on that?
I think Ohio State should just be picked every year to go. But no, we've talked about it as ADs. We haven't come to any conclusions. We talked about 8 versus 9 in the regular season. We haven't, I think the preference that most preference is for 9, but we haven't voted on that. We have a meeting in May where we'll kind of probably finalize some thoughts around that. The same thing with divisions. We've talked about divisions. We're going to look at some models. Again, in May, our hope is to hopefully conclude our thoughts around that. Little of that is tied to the CFP and what might emerge around that process. So I personally don't have a preference. I'm okay with losing the divisions. although I'd like to go back to legends and leaders, but I'm just kidding. But, I'm okay with losing divisions, but I'm interested in seeing the models first. You know, one of the things I want to make sure we do is try and mitigate some of the issues. One of the issues that has been challenging for a number of our schools is a student athlete can go through 4 years and never play at a certain place. And so I want to see if there's a way to fix that. I don't know that. I'm not the schedulers know those things. And so we got to protect our rivalries. You know, obviously we got to do that. So in the new models where there's no divisions, what does that look like? And then with the CFP, what's the value of the championship game? You know, I don't know that. You know, I think we got to talk about that. Is that something that in the CFP calendar and structure, is that still as valuable as it's been? So all that discussion's ongoing, and I really don't have a strong preference yet. I want to listen to my colleagues. I want to learn, and I just want to protect our rivalries and, you know, try and find a way to make sure kids have a chance to play everywhere.
Over here to the right, Clay Hall, WSYX.
Six-parter on NIL. No, I'm kidding. You started a group. Initially, it was like, we can't be involved. We don't broker these deals.
Right.
What does this group do now? And do you get a percentage of that?
Yeah, that's the Edge Group, Clay.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Edge Group is a result of our SWAT team, which has been our legal compliance and trademark and licensing group that every week looks at the deals that the student athletes upload into our portal. Remember, the state law requires our student athletes to share their deals before they enact them. So that's how Open Doors, our partner, helps us. So our athletes load it up in the portal. Our SWAT team looks at them and make sure there's no, you know, adult entertainment, distilled liquor, marijuana deals, those type of things. I can't remember everything in that state law, but they look at that. They don't approve them or disapprove them. They just look for those things. And then the student athlete activates. So the Edge team over time realized that one thing that was missing was a connector. What the Edge team is a connector. So we've communicated with donors, with the chamber members and others that, hey, here's how NIL works. But many of them don't know how to connect with the athletes. So now they can call an Edge team representative and say, this is the profile of what I'm looking for. They're all not going to get certain athletes, but this is the profile of what I'm looking for, as opposed to them going to OhioStateBuckeyes.com, pulling up a team name and reading all their backgrounds on an athlete. They can call the Edge team, and we can connect them with that athlete. But we don't do the deal. We don't negotiate the deal. We don't do any of that space. We just say, hey, here's Clay Hall's phone number, his email address. He fits your profile. Here's 5 other athletes that fit that profile. Run with it.
The other thing, while Harbaugh was going through this saga, and Ryan was mentioned, you know, a month and a half ago for this, that, and the other, and
Yeah, why the hell you guys do that stuff?
so
I've got enough gray hairs.
yeah, you never know what's going to happen, but Ryan has sort of come out very strongly, and maybe he's trying to seize the moment that he's here for a while. Can you verbalize any discussion you've had or where he sees his future?
Yeah.
And why it's important for him now to say, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm going to be?
I think that time was a press conference here. He was responding to a question. You know, at the end of the day, he and Nina are very happy here. His family's here. I think that's exactly what he shared when he was talking to you. And I know that. He's very comfortable here, and I think you're probably alluding to is there going to be a contract issue down the road? Possibly. He and I haven't talked about that. We've been 100% focused on his current staffing, and we just finished that with the football hires, and what most people don't realize is we have quite a few changes in our support staff structure. So we just literally last week finished Mark Pantoni's operation because we had some transitions there. So we've been focused on the team. There'll be a time that he and I sit down and talk about his contract, but we haven't done that at this point in time. Then I'll let you know when that's done.
Sorry about that, Gene. Second row right, Austin Ward, Letterman Road.
To follow up with that, Gene, do you feel urgency, or has the market shifted because of what's happened at Michigan State or Penn State just within the league? I know that a lot of other coaches move, but has that altered your feelings? Because I know it wasn't that long ago that Ryan did get a new contract.
Yeah, he goes out to 27, and I think, I'm not sure, he might be third in the league now. Maybe I haven't even looked at it, but we've always tried to make sure that our top of the pyramid coaches like him are paid consistent with expectations and consistent with performance. And so whenever we get to that, we'll look at it from that perspective, and then we benchmark and look at the other people in the league. We look at national. I haven't even started, and so we'll go down that process. But I don't feel an urgency, no. I feel like we need to do it the right way with he and his family and with the university, president and board of trustees, and we'll get to that. But historically, you guys have watched, I've always tried to make sure that we compensate, consistent with expectations and performance. But I don't feel a sense of urgency. It kind of helped me that you guys had to ask that question. He said, "Yeah, I'm happy here, and I'm not going anywhere." So, kind of, those rumors were rumors. He and I are very transparent. If somebody had offered him a job, he'd call me right away. So that didn't happen. I'm good.
When it comes to putting together the rest of that staff, it felt like there was a time maybe 10 years ago where you were skeptical of where it was going in the arms race. You didn't want a $1 million coordinator. Obviously, you're well past that now with Knowles and some others. How has your philosophy evolved there for financial support of the football program?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Austin. It was somewhere in that window of time, maybe 10 years ago. We had our first $1 million assistant coach, and it wasn't a resistance. It was more of the fact that we didn't have to go there, frankly. And so, we started to go there. We've trickled there, and this year, throughout, from the middle of last year all the way to after that Team Up North game, he and I had consistent conversations about, okay, what do we need to do with the defense? How do we get to that? And then when he had his clarity, I just told him, I said, go find him. Go find that guy. And he had a number of names, and it was a weird time because, fortunately, historically, that week after the Team Up North game, we're not recruiting. And he was out recruiting, and really they called me almost every night talking about candidates, people we talked to, and he ultimately narrowed it down to Jim. And we looked at his compensation, what was out there, and I just said, hey, we got to do what we got to do. And fortunately, I had the support of the president, and we just went to where we went. And so it wasn't, we have to fix our defense. And it's the same thing was true with the other assistants after that. And so I don't know if my philosophy has changed as much as the fact that this is where we are today. And the market's the market, and we got to be in it if we want to be the best. And so that's the real deal.
When you look at the market, the way it's changed, the way name, image, likeness, these bowl conversations play out, like all of the changes going on right now, how much longer do you want to be part of this?
Oh man, I never think about it that way. I just go year to year. I do, Austin. As long as I'm healthy, and I'm passionate, feel I can contribute, as long as my president wants me, as long as my wife's happy, I can go see. I just see my family. I don't think that way. I go year to year. I literally do. I go project to project, initiative to initiative, goal to goal. And when the time comes, I'll know. I'm not one that has an ego that says I got to reach X. I will know when it's time for me to step away, and when it's time for Ohio State to have new leadership. There's an old saying in leadership that right leaders for the right time, and I'll know. Nobody will have to tell me. Oh, you guys will probably tell me. I apologize. I'll probably read about it one morning. I'll wake up and it'll be on Twitter, and I'll say, okay, I guess I'm gone. So, yeah.
Third row left, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Hey, Gene, you talked a little about the 8 versus you had many conversations with ACC and Pac-12 people about the alliance and potentially scheduling more games against teams from those conferences?
Yeah, good question. When we first started the alliance, everything was a little bit about scheduling, and that kind of shifted a little bit. So we did have the 8 versus 9 conversation more intensely at that time, with the thought that, okay, if we played 8, is there some ACC/Pac-12 schools that many of us might play? But we moved away from that pretty quickly because many of us, felt 9 was still right for us in our scheduling model, and we felt that conference contests, when you look at it across the board, conference contests were, from a TV partner point of view, were just as valuable. And so we decided to kind of walk away from that a little bit. That doesn't mean it might not come back up. But at that point in time, we walked away. And then the alliance, the value of the alliance was just bringing together schools that think alike. With broad-based thought process relative to sports sponsorship and educationally based schools. So we kind of looked that way more than anything. But yeah, we talked about that early on and kind of stayed away from it since then. Not to say it might not come back.
Obviously, the college ball playoff, that's kind of been kicked the can down the road here with expansion. What are your thoughts on where things stand right now in terms of playoff expansion and what might happen next there?
I think we're going to expand. I think we'll go to. I'll be surprised if we don't go to 12 at some point. I think there's things that just need to be solved and worked out, and some of them have been. For example, when it first came out about us potentially hosting, and I know our fans rally around that, and they like to host, Alabama up here, but that now we have the flexibility to move into domes. That was not a part of the deal. Now we can move into the Hoosier Dome or Ford Field or Minneapolis or whatever, as if we ended up hosting. And I think that that's important because who knows what, the inclement weather could be like at that time of year in any of our places in the north. So we need that flexibility. There's the conversations that the ACC has. There's a lot of issues that the ACC has and that Jim Phillips has talked about publicly, and I'm not so sure any of those issues or all of them will be resolved in time for it to happen, in 24. But I think some of them can be. And so I think we're going to get there. I don't know when, but I do believe we're going to get there. My understanding is that from a television point of view, other entities will have an opportunity to participate one way or the other through a bid process. So that's resolved one of my issues. So I think we're going to get there. I just think we just got to keep working through these little interests that each conference has, and some people will have to sacrifice and give up some of those interests. It's a negotiation. So I think we'll get there. I hope we get there because I think it's a cool thing. I really do.
Far right, Tom Bosco, WSYX.
Hi, Gene. I want to talk about per seat contributions for a second or two.
Sure.
My understanding is that except for that top tier, most season tickets will be less than last year. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So that's 8 games this coming season. If the schedule is 7 games, will we potentially see those ticket prices go up, do you think?
You could. It depends on the schedule, but you could. And, what premier games are and what aren't. Always, you're still going to have Zone 6. Okay? Remember, that's always going to be your less expensive tickets, and probably some in Zone 5. And that's what everybody mentally have to get their mind wrapped around is there's 6 zones. Zone 1 is your most expensive, and then it cascades from there. But you're right. There could be, when we go to 7 games, depending upon who we're playing, if we're playing Alabama, that's probably going to cause that ticket to be higher. If we don't have one of those premier marquee type, it probably won't. 23 is a perfect example. Actually, we got 6 games in 23, so it will be lower. But yeah, it's just going to fluctuate. It really is.
What's reaction been to that so far? How are ticket sales, especially for, say, the Notre Dame game?
Yeah, we're ahead of schedule, and I don't have the numbers. I apologize. I didn't ask Brett, but I know that we're ahead of where we were historically. We're selling earlier than we've ever sold before. So it's moving well. Obviously, there are some people with the Buckeye Club modernization strategy. They're upset because they historically may have donated to a particular college, and now if they want those points and those seats, they have to donate to the Buckeye Club. And so our team has did a masterful job of working through that with people. So we had some people were upset, but super majority get it. They got it. And at some point, we had to move to this. This was the next step for us. We had to move there, and so things are moving well. We're in a good spot right now. I haven't looked at the Notre Dame game. My assumption is it's probably stupid, but and I'm sure that as we move, closer to the third-party market, it's going to be ridiculous. So always remember, if you really want to look at what the reality is on ticket prices, just look at any of those sites. And that'll tell you, because many of the people who bought those tickets are selling them on that site. So,
And a real quick follow on that. The contribution goes to scholarships, but that scholarship money has already been allocated in the budget. So, I mean, is it safe to say that you just kind of move the money around and that the contribution money is going toward other things? What is it going toward?
I wish you were my accountant. Then you and I would be on the same page. Just move it around. But no, that's so historically, we've generated about $13 million in our annual giving program towards our scholarship cost of $30 million. Okay, we hope that this will allow us in this next fiscal year to generate close to $18 million. Okay, and then over time it will increase. And that's consistent with what other schools in the country have been doing. Team Up North and everybody else, when you do benchmarks and comparisons, it's the annual giving contributions to the athletic department. And so it's not just moving money around. It's those dollars go specifically to offset the cost of the grant and aid. And we hope it goes from this fiscal year, 13 to 18, and then eventually, hopefully we can level it out at some point.
And an important note, Tom, current season ticket holders have until March 1st to get their renewals in. So
Mhm.
that's an important message.
Mhm.
Fourth row left, Jacob Benz, the Lantern.
Yeah, Jim, you were talking a minute ago about CFP expansion and the possibility of Ohio State hosting a game. What kind of impact would you foresee Ohio State and the SHU hosting a CFP game just around campus, ticket sales, whatnot? What kind of impact would hosting a CFP game mean to you in Ohio State?
Yeah, obviously I'm still going to continue to look at the calendar and how that works, but right now, based upon what I understand, the calendar to be, I would probably recommend that we go to Indianapolis and play in the Hoosier Dome. I want a clean environment. I don't want a hard surface for the players. I know the fans loved it, have it in the shoe and, maybe it's snowing and we're playing whoever. But that surface is a whole new ball game. And I would prefer to have the indoor elements and have a clean field for, if it was this year, I would want CJ to have good weather. It's just that simple. And so the excitement, in my view, would be the same. We've been blessed to have experiences in the Hoosier Dome, playing in the Big Ten Championship, and I think our fans understand that environment. They love the hotels, they love the restaurants, and all that. So while it's difficult to take it away from the SHU, I still think that's the right thing to do for the players in the game. So yeah, we'll just have to pray that we're in that situation, or pray that we get a bye, and that's not a part of it.
You mentioned the surface and the playing surface and whatnot. A few weeks ago, you came out with a new turf design for Ohio Stadium. I'm curious just how involved you were with that. What's your excitement level with the new design for next season and just whatnot?
Yeah, I had some involvement. I lost. I voted for the Paisley Field, so I always defer to my teammates, and so I was just one vote. But we had we went through a process, and we took some elements of what fans gave us. The Buckeye leaves on the field, and the scarlet and gray stripes in the end zone, and the outline of the gray, and so we took a few elements. We didn't go crazy, but it was fun. It was exciting to see all the different ideas, and so I just really listened to my creative and finally agreed with their recommendation that this was the way to go, and And so we got to respect our traditions, and so we kind of stay true to that a little bit. Probably last another 5-6 years if we're lucky. We may do some different things in the summertime to cover the end zones to mitigate the fading of the scarlet. I think the field will be in good shape.
Go far left, Justin Holbrook, WCMH.
I know it's probably been a lot of stress and moving parts with NIL, but Travion had a quote yesterday, said change his life forever, helps his mom out, his brother's out. How often do you hear that from athletes, even non-football basketball? And what is that like to hear that as you're going through all these growing pains in this time?
Yeah, it's not stressful. I mean, to me, I've embraced, NIL a long time ago. I think that's probably why I was asked to co-chair that committee. I've always been one to drive towards how do we provide more economic opportunities for our young people, and cost of attendance. I was an idiot for years on changing our scholarship model. So it's really never been stress for me on NIL. It's been about learning. It's been about making sure we educate our student athletes the right way. So right now they pay their taxes, and all those type of things, and that's been really cool. Travion's story is just phenomenal. It's just phenomenal, so yeah, it makes me feel good. We had, some of you may have paid attention, we had 3 of our athletes go to the Board of Trustees meeting last week and publicly talked about their experience. I had Sarah in volleyball and Mitchell in lacrosse, and Mitchell's a beast. If you haven't followed him, our lacrosse player, Mitchell Pelkey, I mean, he's a creative beast. And talking to Jimmy Sotos last night on freaking TikTok. You ever see Jimmy Soto dance on TikTok? I mean, come on. So, those to your point, Travion and CJ and all those guys, they're top of the pyramid. But when I talk to the other Olympic sport athletes who are able to engage this, it's just so warming, because we got to remember they're on partial scholarships. They're not on full ride scholarships, and they are able to defray some of the costs that they incur. And Mitchell's story was a perfect one. He said publicly he's going to make about $200,000. He's getting paid by YouTube monthly, and he's on 30% scholarship. So he won't leave with that. And that's the stuff that moves me. Sure, Travion's story moves me as well, because he can help his family. But our Olympic sport athletes, Sarah was a walk-on, and she's killing it through clinics. So I hear so many of them. It's warming. It really is. It's not stressful, just challenging, just to constantly stay ahead of it. And then the Wild Wild West part is, can't keep track of that. It's just crazy. Great question.
Second row left, Bill Landis, The Athletic.
Gene, I guess maybe following up on that, was there anything eye-opening about the influence that NIL had with this most recent football recruiting class, and these collectives popping up, and just, I guess, maybe how that entire space is changing now, because there's this new element that I guess could, in theory, be used to entice kids to go to certain programs?
Yeah, that's the part where we need that federal legislation that we were talking about earlier. We got to get a hold on the inducement part. That's the difference between us and the NFL, the NBA, all the others. We recruit. We don't draft. And so how do we find a way to eliminate that part of it? And so we need help in that space. Otherwise, it's just going to keep going crazy, and the whole model will be affected big time. Because if we have to shift all of our focus to supporting collectives, then it's just going to be a whole new financial model. So I worry about it a little bit. I know that there's collectives emerging in our marketplace. There's a couple of them that have contacted our compliance people and our SWAT team, trying to make sure they do it the right way, and their focus is is rightfully so on our current student athletes, not recruiting.
Did you feel like, as I know you put something out where you guys were, I think, maybe had the most NIL money for your athletes, but as you saw that develop with football in particular, did you feel at all like you guys were behind or needed to catch up, and I guess how are you attacking that, if so?
Yeah, I felt like in that particular space with the collectives, where you see some of that recruiting stuff going on, it's no question we're behind, because we weren't doing that, and we're not encouraging that. And so So yes, but the other part of it is if you're a recruit and you're coming to Columbus, Ohio, and Ohio State, it's having those conversations with a Travion Henderson or others to say, hey, this is what I get here. You know, and I don't want to disparage other markets, but the reality is this market, if you're an entrepreneur and you're willing to get out there and do this thing the right way, you're going to hit home runs if that's your interest. And we have to keep in mind that, you know, all recruits they're not wired in that. There's some. And so, but yes, but to your point is, yeah, we were behind and are behind in that space, and all it takes is us losing one class for us to take a step back. So how do we make sure we stay in the right way, you know, relative to NCAA rules, stay the right way? Because still technically, you're not allowed to recruit with these inducements. So there's a lot of issues going around this issue right now. So, yeah, that's a great question. We are in that particular space behind.
With the alliance stuff, if it gets to the point where the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12 have some sort of deal where you're all playing each other every year, might that impact your scheduled series with, you know, Texas and Alabama and Georgia teams that would be outside of that?
Which is why we're not going there. But yeah, so yeah, you know, that's the reason right there. We talked about it. You know, I just don't see philosophically for us a scheduling model that's really worked for us, where we would be supportive of making that change. A 9 makes sense to us. I'm still willing to listen to 8, but even if we go 8, I'm not so sure we're going to mess around and schedule. You know, we're going to carry the load for the conferences and schedule Pac-12 and ACC schools, because we're going to play, you know, whoever it is. And it might be a Pac-12 or ACC school. It might be like Washington's on our schedule down the road. So, but I don't see us making any changes that way. Those games are huge. It's like Notre Dame. You know, what is this, the 6th time we've played Notre Dame in the regular season? So it's the coolest thing. So, yeah, I don't see us making that change.
Third row middle, Patrick Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Gene, I want to clarify your comment about playing in Indianapolis for the playoff. Would you then encourage that if Alabama or Texas were to host a game, that they would play indoor, neutral site, similar thing, even though weather is not as much of a factor?
Yeah, no. That we would only do that because of weather, and you know, you know, Columbus, we're south of the snowboard, the snow belt, so our weather is different than it is in Wisconsin or Minnesota. So really, I want that flexibility for the league, but depending upon the date that this thing ends up, you know, we may look at the historical calendar and say, oh, yeah, it's okay to play in Columbus. So we don't need to go do a deal that particular year with the Hoosier Dome. So that's why I say is the championship game still is valuable, because one of my concerns is, you know, the length of time that the playoff is going to take. We're going into the 3rd week of January. I mean, do we really need to do that to play the championship game? So I'm sensitive to finals week. We already impact that with the championship game for the conference. I'm sensitive. I'm old school. I'm sensitive to Christmas. I think our guys need 3 days off at least around that window of time. So I'm looking at that compaction, having those conversations with our colleagues, and I'm not alone. Everybody's having this conversation. But for us, it plays into the weather issue. The deeper you go in December, more, as you know, more challenging it is here. So I just want it for the North. I certainly wouldn't want to, you know, go to Scottsdale and play in Glendale when you can play outdoors as they're at Arizona State.
But you're saying the North is moving it as just an option. It's not.
Yeah, just an option. Right, that's right. Just we want the flexibility to go indoors. It's not like automatic. Now you have to come up with a strategy to predetermine that at some point in time, because, you know, you have to cut the deal with the facility and do all the operations, ticket sales, all that. So there becomes a time, but a lot of that is really, to Pat's point, is going to be date dependent. And so I'm kind of anxious to see how this playoff schedule actually will end up. When will it actually start? So that's critical. It's critical.
And then you were talking about Ryan's future contract stuff. I'm just curious with Chris Holtman, kind of where you see what he's done, and I think we're in your
Big
time
win
now.
last night, man. Wow. Yeah, no, same. Haven't looked at his. I think he's 25. So, yeah, at some point, do the same thing with Chris. Look at his. I haven't done that, but we will do that in the future. Yeah.
Happy with where the
Oh yeah, I am really happy with where we are. We strive for championships. There's no question about that, and we need to get there. And we will. But you look at his recruiting; it's like it's off the chain. And you look at, I just love the teaching he does. And I'll use last night as an example. Everybody talked about how ugly the first half was, but I knew. My wife played the game, coached the game, so I have a little different vantage point as she's drawing stuff up on napkins. But you against that zone, the 3-2, and I knew exactly what we need to do because I was told. But anyway, so I knew what he was gonna do. And you look at the second half compared to the first, and how our players were positioned and spread out and moving. It was it was his teaching. The guy is doggone good, and so yeah. I guess I'm getting a little off track there, but I feel real good about what he's doing. Feel good about his recruiting. His hire with Tony was phenomenal. So yeah, I feel good. And at some point in time, the same with Ryan. We'll have a contract conversation with him.
Far right deep, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Gene, when you see the SEC make the moves that it did during the last calendar year, and then you guys, try to form a little bit of the alliance, so to speak, how important is it in your conversations with the powers in the Big Ten to make sure that you guys are staying aggressive, not just with the Pac-12 and ACC, but to keep up with what the folks in the Southeast are trying to do?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if we really have conversations about trying to keep up with them. We always try and have conversations about what do we feel we need to do as a conference. We're a broad-based conference. Many of our schools sponsor super majority of sports. They don't. They average 19. And so it's a whole different philosophy. And so we talk more about, what do we need to do for the Big Ten to keep the Big Ten as valuable as it is in our footprint for our fans, for our athletes, and our television partners. And those are the conversations we have. It's rare that we, compare ourselves, to even the ACC or the Pac-12. In the Alliance, if we were just looking at TV value, we're more valuable to the Pac-12 and the ACC than they are to us. So we don't have those conversations. We just talk more about, in the Alliance, the fact that we think similarly when it comes to different pieces of legislation. We got 41 votes. So it's not like, the Big 12 or the SEC or the ACC. We don't really think that way. We kind of talk more about ourselves and what's right for us. And then in those conversations, I always have to keep in mind, Ohio State's different than a number of teams in our league. So I'm a part of that family and part of that team. But I got to say, okay, what does this mean for us compared to, I'll let you guys fill in the blanks.
So I guess piggybacking off of that, you just talked about TV partners a little bit. When you have, those conversations about the TV contracts, what do you make sure make sure Kevin Warren and the people there know, is important to Ohio State as opposed to the Illinois and Purdue's and the other teams in the Big Ten of the world? What do you guys make sure that they know is important to you?
Yeah, so we actually had a call this morning. We have a AD call this morning. We talked about TV and we have this opportunity to, with our Fox partner to do some other deals. And so we're having conversations this morning. And first and foremost, as you all know, we share revenue equally from a television contract across the board. So for Ohio State, we understand our value to the conference, and I kind of know our tolerances, and how many night games we're going to do on the road. And you guys have seen years where, there were probably too many. And so conversations moved forward from there about, we're not doing that. And so there's, so it depends on the issue. I can't say it's a holistic view. It's more depends on the issue. And I'm really affirmative in certain things. And usually I'm not alone, but we certainly know our place in the league and and how we help drive it. And it's appreciated. So we don't have many battles. If that answers your question.
Gene, to go back to something you said early on, you said looking at the divisions in May at the meeting you guys are having, is that just the difference between the status quo and going without? Is there still any thought about shuffling the divisions at all and coming up with a more equitable football, specifically football
Great
balance?
question, Nathan. No, we didn't talk about that. That's a great point. We didn't do it. It is stay status quo or eliminate divisions. We didn't talk about shuffling at all. Yeah, and I don't think that'll come up.
In 2020, there was a lot of strife in the league, really. I mean,
Right.
a lot of and people, certainly questioning just the cohesiveness of the league at that point. Do you feel like a lot of that was repaired in 2021? Do you feel like there's a better standing in the league right now across the board than there was just
No
a year
question.
ago?
Obviously that time frame created so much stress for everybody, and uncertainty and differences of opinion and really fierce, heated debate and arguments and anger. I mean, you had every emotion during that time frame, right? Because we didn't end up where we wanted to end up. We lost in what we wanted to do. There was that level of emotion and intense emotion doesn't go away without some time to heal. And it's typical, group dynamics with any team or group of individuals. Everyone has to open up, be honest, be forthright, be vulnerable, and have honest conversations once you get past that to try and heal. And we've done that as a conference. Our collaboration is off the chain. It's back to where it was. And so I feel good about where we are, feel good about our leadership, have no concerns about that. Kevin conducts conference calls every Wednesday with the athletic directors. We have an agenda. We talk about it. He gets our opinion, and if we vote on something, that's his marching orders. So we're back to where we were, and that's comforting. But you're right. During that time frame, it was some street fighting going on. Thank God we weren't in person. Ward would probably won.
I was curious, as you said, it had been a while since the 2021 football and Ohio State football season ended the way it did. Just what did you see within this building, within the team, the reaction to the Michigan loss, and what I guess that could mean going forward?
Yeah, great question. It was hard. I mean, it was hard, not just in this building, but from the time that we got on the bus and came home, and that's not something that we ever want to experience again, and it's not something that we really think should ever happen again. And so our expectation is to every year win that game, and we have done that historically. So how do we respond? What I try and do as your athletic director is, step back and look at the big picture, and I did that with the whole season as I considered that game. We were young. We grew as the season went on. I really felt we grew. We were young in a lot of positions, and I turned the page immediately to, okay, what do I need to do to help Ryan Day do what he needed to do to fix it? Because in this building, that was his mindset was, okay, I gotta fix our defense, for example. I gotta help create more leadership among the players. And so he's done that. So how do I help him? So the mood in the building was felt more for me through him and what he was trying to do. And you know, I really love the reaction and how we responded in the Rose Bowl. I think that was a direct result of him trying to get more leadership from the players. You know, great teams have talent, they have great coaches, but at the end of the day, players at some point in time got to take control. They got to take control of the locker room, they got to take control of the game, and if you want to be a champion. And there was just so many puppies last year, you know, if you really think about it. One of the youngest teams in our history. But anyway, that's longer than you probably wanted. But at the end of the day, it was not a great place to be. So I enjoyed mat drills this morning. So it was kind of cool.
Time for just a few more. Far left, Patrick Mayhorn, Buckeye Sports Bulletin.
Gene, you talk a little bit about the education side of NIL, trying to make sure that players know what they're doing. Has there been any thoughts about formalizing that as a class or even a thing that players can kind of focus on, or are you more interested in bringing in consultants to talk about that, as I know you have so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, we haven't talked about it being a formal class. Not sure you could justify, you know, credit hour production, you know, in order to have a faculty member actually be in that space. We do have a relationship with our innovation and entrepreneurial program with the Fisher College of Business, so they help us. Jeremy Darlow has written a number of books on marketeering. He's a part of our education process, so I think we will stay with that model because we'll constantly figure out and bring in new people. Learfield, for example, is developing some stuff, and so we'll end up using what they have on their platform. So don't see us moving to a class. I see us just constantly using our third-party partners, our experiences, keep educating them, and them educating each other. This morning with the football team, it was really beautiful that many of the athletes were kind of educating each other on topics that I was bringing up. And so a lot of this stuff happens in the locker room, you know, and you know, our men's basketball team that ended up doing their, I forgot what they call it, doing their gear thing, something edition, what is it called? Something edition. But they got a deal with a gear company where they're all doing it and they're all sharing the money together. That happened in the locker room. That wasn't us saying, here, this is what you should go do. That's how this stuff happens. So I don't see us doing a class. I just think we got to continue to encourage them to use their experiences and their intellectual property, and they'll come up with ideas. These kids are creative as all get out. Unbelievable what they come up with.
Have you seen any shift at all from maybe more athletes taking marketing classes, more athletes showing an interest in that on their own? I know a lot of
No, I haven't. Good question, but I haven't seen that at all. No, I haven't. Good question.
We'll go a couple more. Front row middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Eugene, you're obviously limited to 10 assistant coaches, you know, scholarships, but the support staff is pretty much up to you guys. Yeah, and you know what SEC schools are doing. You know how big those staffs have become. What's your appetite for expanding your staff to that kind of level?
Yeah, I think what Ryan and I've talked about is not, again, what the SEC does. What do we need? You know, the quality control assistants, you know, the recruiting staff, which I think is up to 7 now. I forgot, I lost track. Is what do we actually need? And so we've looked at that, and we've grown. You know, as Austin said, 8-10 years ago, we didn't have the number of quality control analysts that we currently have. And so I've always shared, you know, even with Urban and now Ryan, was, you know, the more people you add, the more risk you take. So you better make sure they got a serious job where they're actually bringing something to the table. Just because somebody else has it doesn't mean that's right. So what we've done is really looked at what we need, how it would help, and added appropriately over time. I feel good about where we are right now. That doesn't mean, you know, the equipment room, we might have to add another person, or actually most people, you know this, but, you know, our training staff has grown a little bit. So, yeah, so we don't really look at them that much. We look at what do we actually need? And frankly, what can we accommodate, you know, in this freaking building?
In regard to the stadium, is there going to be anything new this year? Obviously, the turf is going to be new.
Yeah.
What's the status of that, and how important is that to get new turf?
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, we'll put that in this summer. We're actually changing the turf in the indoor field as well this summer. So we're doing both of those. And in the stadium, nothing really new. We're just going to get better at our Wi-Fi and all the stuff we implemented last year with the mobile ticketing, mobile parking. We learned a lot last year, so we'll be able to get better at that. Activating more apps in the stadium with our Wi-Fi capabilities now, trying to engage the fan more, do things in that space. But I don't see a whole lot of differences.
Over here, front row right, Tim May, Letterman Row.
By the way, I think people in Indianapolis prefer you say Lucas Oil Stadium, not.
Oh yeah, that's probably true.
Hoosier Dome got imploded.
That's right. That's right. Lucas Oil. I'm so old, Tim.
I don't want to get bad with those guys, just in case. You know. I want to ask you, what do you feel like your obligation now is to the student athlete, as y'all call them, with name, image, and likeness out there, the opportunities, the transfer portal where they can be here one day and gone the next and stuff. How has that kind of changed, in your opinion, y'all's obligations to them, or what you, for another term, provide them? I mean, when they're here from a services standpoint, et cetera.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, you know, over the years I've always shared with our coaches, we have to go to where the kids are today. Okay, where I was and where you were when you came up is a totally different place than where these kids are today. You know, so we got to go to where they are. You know, the mental health issues are significant in our space. You know, back in the day when Jim Lachey was playing, if he had a problem, he was told to go run stadium stairs, and he got it figured out by the time he got back, right? You can't do that today. So our ecosystem that we serve is different today. And whether it's NIL, whether it's mental health issues, whatever it is, we got to go to where they are, and we have to adjust. So it's not about obligation. It's about making sure that we pay attention to who we serve and putting them in place so that they can be successful and giving them the support that they need. We are here to help them get a degree, get an education, win championships, develop as a human being, and find a career path. Because remember, most of them don't get jobs. Most of them don't go pro. So we're trying to help them understand when you leave our little cocoon, you know, you need to have a job, because that's why you go to college, is to find a career. And so, you know, that hasn't changed for me. That's not an obligation. That's, you know, that's who we serve.
Do you ever see y'all getting to a point where players are in essence, I guess contract's not the right word because y'all still aren't paying them yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But do you ever see an obligation thing there?
Yep.
And not just from them, but from a coach's standpoint, I would think you guys as athletic directors were sort of troubled by the, I don't know, maybe you weren't, but the movement and the money involved in coaching movement
years
over
ago?
the past 3 months. And how do you rein that in without not putting up illegal barriers?
Yeah, you're not going to change the market and what schools will feel they need to do in order to pay a coach or pay ex-coaches. I mean, you know, all that stuff, you know, you can't legislate that. It's not. You're not going to be able to do that. But I think to your point is, if we move to an employer-employee model, everything changes. The whole game changes. And then obligation, the word obligation comes to play. And quantifiable goals and objectives and evaluations and ultimately terminations occur. So that's a whole new ballgame. And when it moves to employer-employee relationship, and you know, that's when, you know, you'll read on Twitter that I'm out. And so at the end of this, so I guess the model will change at some point, and I believe it probably will. You might have collective bargaining or something of that nature, so that changes it.
But did the NIL come along maybe at the right time for you guys from the standpoint of keeping, you know, that model alive that y'all players aren't paid for play, but they're still getting paid? And
No, I think it came around too late.
Dodge a bullet there in some respects.
No, I think it came too late, and the NCAA didn't dodge a bullet because it came too late. It's kind of like cost of attendance. I mean, some of you remember that battle. I mean, at the end of the day, all of that was too late. Cost of it, we had that scholarship model for decades, and it was flawed. And we couldn't get it in place because we were part of 353 schools in Division I, as opposed to the FBS schools who were voting on it themselves and making their own decisions because we're different. So that's another conversation. But at the end of the day, no, the NIL was too late. Cost of attendance was too late. Paying for parents to travel to postseason was too late. All those things were too late. Had we done many of those things years ago, we'd be in a different place right now. I mean, I can go back to different meetings all the way in the Marco Island at the Marriott and in the Dallas, in the Anatole when it first opened, where all these things were talked about, but you couldn't get it done. Yeah. And so, to your question, no, way too late, way too late. We've been on the defensive as an NCAA forever. I can't remember a time where we ever were on the offensive. So we're too late. Which is why pressure groups and interest groups are ruling the day. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead, Doug, Marie.
You got me on a little soapbox there, Tim.
Gene, you mentioned some of the TV discussions the ADs were having. How would you like the Big Ten to proceed in the negotiations for the TV deal, and what is the potential there? Because whatever you guys are making a pretty penny,
right?
The distribution of the schools from the TV deal, but it's up in what? Do you have 2 more years on this?
Yeah, so we have a sublease, right, with our ESPN. But Fox deal with BTN goes to 32, but this piece is 26. Okay.
What's the potential there?
I don't know. That's the thing that we're not really sure of. We want to make sure that we have flexibility to consider other platforms, right? The different ways that people watch television, but I don't know. I mean, that's the hard part. We're having conversations, we're learning, we're using a consultant, all those type of things, but we're trying to figure that out. First and foremost, we're talking to our current partner, ESPN, which is where we may end up, and then how with them and Fox do we make sure we, provide access for these other platforms to give us some flexibility, a la carte, so to speak. But I don't know. That's a real interesting. That's what we're going through right now, is trying to figure out what is that potential, and giving us flexibility. The potential in revenue is probably big, but we don't know that for sure. We just started.
All right. 59
We're
minutes.
good. Everybody good?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.